everyone, Gaijin Goombah here. So, much to my surprise, the last video that I put out just talking about that massive trip that I took to Japan a couple weeks back is actually sitting really pretty. That video is actually at the #1 slot of my last 10 uploads. So, I don't know, I took that as a message as to maybe I should talk more about personal experiences in Japan and whatnot, because y'all seem to like it a whole lot. Okay, so here's the thing. I absolutely treasured the time that I had in Japan. I loved the 2 weeks that I had over there. But the thing is that there were just some things that I forgot about with Japan that I just really hate. And surprisingly enough, within this trip, there were even more things that I found that I just really didn't like. And I want to preface this video before I say anything else, and that is, every country's got its problems. Every country's got its goods and its bads. Every single country has this. And I like to think that I'm actually humanizing Japan a little bit more by pointing out the good and the bad. The last video was all about the good. I had nothing but radiant, wonderful things to say about Japan, but in this video, I kind of want to play devil's advocate for a second and kind of talk about the things that are bad, and not necessarily to dog on Japan, but to try and warn some of you who are going to be joining. I have had so many messages from people who are like, oh, I'm going to be going to Japan in like a month, 6 months, something like that, and I was really invigorated by your video to go see out these other things. This is going to be the warning video, okay? This is to kind of temper the expectations, rein in the rose-colored glasses and whatnot, just to be a little bit more real with everything. Now, the other thing too is that this is going to sound like a whole bunch of blanket statements, and it's really not meant to be. Because no matter what I say in this video, there are always going to be exceptions to the rule. Just understand that there are going to be exceptions to literally everything. And I guess the last thing that I'll preface is that there's going to be some things in here while I only have a very little bit to say, and some things that I'm going to be talking for quite a while about. So just understand that because I don't talk about something for a long period of time doesn't make it any less important. All of these things that I'm going to be talking about are going to be very important in their own right. So just keep an eye out for that. Bicycles! This is one of the first things that I came to dread and kind of hate in Japan, and the funny thing is that I was really misconstrued about a lot of it. So the first time that this happened, I was studying abroad at Kanto Gakuin Daigaku in and around Yokohama, and the difference between bicyclists, people on bikes between Yokohama and like Tokyo is that in Yokohama, if they come up behind you, they will always ring the bell. And I hated that because it scared the crap out of me every single time it happened, because I took that the same as honking. But here's the thing, is that honking and bell ringing between cars and bikes are completely different in Japan as compared to here. They really are tools of communication, not so much telling you to move, get out the way, or you're being an idiot. It literally is, hey, I'm coming in, watch out. So, getting back to bicycles, because of that knowledge, I actually came to a sort of peace with bikes. Until this trip, because here's what happened. So like I said, I spent a lot of time in a car. I basically just got such a huge, unique experience that I've never had before in Japan because I never drove. I either walked or took a bike or took a train literally everywhere. So I got to see some brand new frustrations, and this one was really bad. Like, to give context to this, I want you to look at this particular video. Look at how narrow these roads are, okay? These are meant to be 2-lane roads. So here's kind of the funny thing, and this was told to me prior to doing a whole lot of driving. My buddy Matt Papa said that all bicyclists have a death wish, and I really didn't believe that at the time because that seems a little extreme. Boy, howdy, do I understand it so much better now. You saw how tight these roads are, right? Like, even on the sides where there might be sidewalks, like, bikes are driving on those sidewalks and in the street. And it was kind of uncanny. I had never seen so many cyclists just jump out in the middle of traffic. Like, I remember a time, it was in the evening, we were in Akihabara, we were going to Yamachan's, and there was this guy who just went from the side railings all the way out to the street, just woo! Do something, like signal, slow down, something, so we don't hit you. And or Or there will be times, there will be so many times when it comes to domestic roads in Japan, there are a lot of blind spots. You might see it in some of this footage that I'm putting up, but in a lot of these hard turns, there are mirrors. You have the mirrors to see what's coming in from the other side, because some of these are like 90-degree turns, and it's like wall, and it's just, ugh, I don't know how people drive. Well, we would be driving down and then do one of those hard turns, and there would be some dude on a bike in the middle of the streets. Stop! It's just, I don't know how people do it. I don't know how people drive in Japan. It is bad enough trying to get cross traffic through some of these streets, but then you've got people on bikes who just don't give an absolute F, and they just go. I know why. It took me some time and a little bit of research, but I think I understood why. So I learned from a Japanese member of my taiko group that you actually don't learn hand turn signals. Like, okay, this is turning left, this is turning right. This is slowing down and stopping. You know, they're the same in Japan. But the thing is that nobody learns these until you go to driver's school. And not everyone goes to driver's school. There are a lot of vehicular operators in Japan, don't get me wrong. But there's not a lot of reason to if you don't have to. So, the fact that no one does this, I take that back. There was one guy, remember, exception of the rule. There was one guy who did it. And he actually did this, and I'm like, oh, he's turning left, and he turned left, and I'm like, why can't do that? Please do that. I'm having PTSD. I wasn't even behind the wheel, and I'm having PTSD of like almost hitting people. So I just, ugh. It's a small thing, but if you are renting a car, if you are driving in Japan, if you are going to be a cyclist in Japan, watch out for bicycles. They think they own the road. And you know what? Sorry, another realization. They think they own the road because they kind of do. The thing is if you cause an accident in a car and you hit a bicyclist, I'm never gonna get, I don't know why I'm struggling with that word. If you ever hit a cyclist, it's your fault. It doesn't matter what the situation is. They could have jumped out in front, or they could have slid in, or you could have hit a wet spot, whatever. It doesn't matter. 99.9% of the time, if you hit someone on a bicycle, it is your fault. Bicyclists, just be careful of them. You know, I just realized Little G hasn't been here to add in any kind of quips or anything like that. So, I'm gonna go figure out where he is. Just give me a second, okay? Oh, there you are. Been going on for like 8 minutes without you. What are you doing?
You know that Kankure-like game, Victory Bells, that we helped promote back in 2016? Well, the game's been out for a while, so I figured it's high time I jump on it.
Oh yeah, I remember that, where they got all the ship girls that actually spoke their mother tongue and were culturally dressed.
Мы сделаем всё, капитан.
Nada del duro, capitano.
艦長、ご存知のように新しく来てくれる人たちにお会いできるのは本当に嬉しいんです。
Well, culturally dressed with a little bit of titillation thrown in.
You didn't hear it, did you? Google and Apple made them censor the girls. Yeah, some of the more sultry characters had to put on booty shorts or else the game wouldn't be put in the shop.
But it's an Old West burlesque outfit. I've seen more skin in the public space than this. So wait, other mobile games can get away with this, and advertise like this. But Victory Bells, of all things, had to censor themselves.
Yep.
Ugh, God, speaking of stuff that's pissing me off today.
And it's a good game. You can tell that the devs are big fans of content collection and want to put their own spin on it. Full of R&D and gear choices, insanely deep levels of strategic management, and as we've been saying, the style and design behind these gals and their battles are so richly detailed to the setting, style, and ship designs of World War II. And just recently, they dropped an expansion for torpedo-based warfare as well as an auto-sortie option that makes the grind aspects of the game a lot more digestible.
Well, I guess then now's a pretty prime time to check it out if they're making the grind simpler. So yeah, if you like the idea of an ultra-strategic World War II game chock full of culture diversely designed ship gals from all over the world, check out Victory Bells. They put a lot of love in this game and had to deal with a lot of unfair double standard BS from distributors. So if this game sounds like a good time to you, pop on over to victorybellsgame.com and check it out for yourself. It absolutely deserves your attention. Man, I gotta get back to this video before I start ranting about this double standard stupidity. Okay, where was I? Oh, yeah, bad tourists. All right, so that's the funny thing about this video. I'm not necessarily just talking about natives of Japan that are doing things that drive me nuts. There's an equal amount of non-Japanese people in Japan doing things that are driving me nuts. And Arguably, these are worse. So, okay, so let me set the scene really quick, okay? Aki and I, we just got to Harajuku. We're waiting to meet up with Kaho. She's a lovely lady. Go read her book. And we decided that while we're waiting, we were gonna go hit up Meiji Jingu. I hit up Meiji Jingu every single time I'm in Tokyo. I mentioned that in the last video. I freaking love it there. This was the first time I ever had like super bad feels being at a shrine. And I talked about it before of the problem of over-tourism, but I want to go into some examples of problems of over-tourism that actually bothered me. You know, it's actually kind of funny too. I had someone in my comment section saying, well, isn't it kind of ironic that you're complaining about tourists when you yourself are being a tourist in Japan at this time? And it's like, yeah, I'm gonna complain because there's some stuff that you don't do. I'm trying so hard not to swear. I can't guarantee that I'm gonna be able to get through this video without it. I'm trying not to make this a blanket statement of being really mean, because it's going to sound like that. But it's just, I've never seen so many people in a place of worship really disrespecting that place of worship. Case in point, when you go, look at me, kids. When you go to a shrine in Japan, I don't care how big it is, how small it is. If you go in through those torii gates, first of all, take off your hat. Do you have a hat on? Take it off. I live in a hat. You can't see it, it's behind the door. I live in a hat. You all know that I live in that Goombah hat. I take that hat off. Even in some of the older footage that I had, I took that hat off. Here's the other thing you do. Bow at the torii gate. I don't care. Just do a little... You know, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be like whoosh. Just do a little... That's all you have to do. Then go. Alright? You're entering a place of worship. Whether you worship there or not, whether you see it as a tourist attraction or not, it is a place of worship. You need to treat it as such. Alright? Because here's another thing that happened that drove me absolutely mad. There are two guys at Meiji Jingu. Whose entire job it was to hold a sign in 4 different languages that said, shut it. Granted, it said be quiet, but it might as well said shut it. Because there were people that were at the Honden the Haiden. The place where you like throw in the money and you pray, and it's right next to the other building where the object where the kami is enshrined is at. And people were just talking loudly. And it blew my mind that there were two guys whose job it was to hold a sign that told people to shut up. You're in a place of worship. Respect it. But no, the worst part. The worst thing that I saw. I have always kept my cool when it came to other foreigners completely disrespecting important place in Japan, but it took every fiber of my being and Aki's being not to say something about this. There was a guy at the Chozuya / Teimizuya. It's got a couple different names. It's the place where you essentially do a fast version of misogi. Misogi, when it comes to Shinto, is a process of most of the time donning white. You're going in and you're ritually purifying yourself through water. It's a bit of a dense, kind of complicated process. Sometimes you sit under a waterfall, sometimes you're just in really cold water. It is a very important spiritual practice when it comes to Shinto. It is relieving yourself of kegare. If you don't know what kegare is, go watch my other videos, but basically it's just a spiritual pollutant that causes all kinds of problems. Not necessarily sin. This guy was at the Chozuya washing his feet. Now, some of you might be saying, well, Gaijin, aren't you supposed to be doing that? No! Not at the Chozuya! If you're doing misogi, that's one thing, but this wasn't misogi. When you go to a Chozuya, when you go to a Teimizuya, it is a very simple process. If there's a ladle, which a lot of places still have them, you take the ladle, you get the fresh water, you do the left hand, switch hands, do the right hand, take a little bit in your hand, rinse your mouth out a little bit, and then you do a little patoo into the used water section. There's like a raised section where the water sits, and anything that is below that, that's where you put the bad water. It's where you put your nasty water. And at the very end, you take the ladle, you hold it over the section where the water's supposed to go down, and you tilt it, and all the water goes down, it cleans the ladle, and you put the ladle back. It's so simple. And it's even more simple now because of COVID. So, because of the advent of COVID, there is no more ladle. It is literally just a little drizzle of water. And it's even easier because it's like left hand, right hand, sometimes mouth. Patooey, you're done. It's simple, that's it. You don't do anything else. This guy had his naked feet out, had his sandals off, washing his feet. I want you to understand, washing your feet in the Cholzia is kind of like going to a Baptist church and washing your feet just without any celebration, without any sort of like baptismal ritual or anything like that. Just washing your feet in the baptismal tub. All right? You wouldn't do that here. Don't do it there. And look, language is one thing. Not understanding Japanese and you're still wanting to go over it, that's one thing, because so much of urban Japan is actually really English friendly. You can get around pretty easily in Tokyo if you don't know any Japanese. There's a lot of bilingual signs around. But don't go to Japan with no prior knowledge of the culture. You have no excuse. There are books upon audiobooks upon videos just like this that explain what the culture of this is. You have no excuse. Do your research before you go. Please stop making us look bad. And here's the crazy thing, that was just that one temple experience. I saw so many things happening that I get that people are excited to be going back to Japan because the COVID lockdown's up. I was excited to go. But there's just some things you need to read the room and understand. Like me, Matt, and Jess, and Aki, we were at this quaint little cafe, lovely little cafe. It seats maybe 8 people tops. Actually, no, it sat maybe 6 people tops. And this was such a cute little lovely cafe, and it was family run, and I absolutely loved it. And we were there for like maybe the first 5-10 minutes, something like that. And it's a little cramped. We're all sitting a little tight, but I'm doing it because that's the space that we're allotted, and you make do. You do what they do. And then I see a family of 5 roll in, and it's not like a mom, a dad, a kid, and a couple of grandparents. It was a mom and a dad and 3 really young kids. We're talking like 8 and younger coming to this tiny little cafe. And if that wasn't bad enough, because the kids were running around all over the place, they were just bull rushing these poor people with English. Don't do that! Go to Japan with the assumption that nobody there understands English, because you'll be surprised at how many people don't. And they just, during this conversation, this person who was bull rushing all this English to this poor middle-aged Japanese woman just trying to do her job, he was just sitting there being like, why don't you understand? And I'm like, different country! I don't know why it is that people still expect other people in other parts of the world to just automatically know English. That's not how it works, and especially in Japan. And look, I'll go one step further. I did something really stupid, okay? So in that last video, I talked about how Aki and I took a Shinkansen all the way up to Sendai, right? Well, I kind of screwed that whole process up twice over. The first time was trying to figure out, okay, when do we need a board? And I should have known better. I really should have known better, but this was the first time that I'd taken a Shinkansen by myself. I just never had any reason not to prior. Either I just never used it, or I was with other people and I just kind of went on autopilot. But the thing is that when it comes to Hayabusa Shinkansen, Tokyo's its last stop going in that direction. So what they'll do is they'll stop and they'll clean everything out. I kind of should have known that, but for whatever reason at the time, I brain farted super hard and didn't realize that, okay, they were just cleaning. And there were a whole bunch of people around me just kind of standing there, but they were also talking. And I was like, okay, well, timeout. Are they waiting on something, or does the train not leave for a little while, so they're just kind of hanging out? And so I walked into the Shinkansen train, and I started to open my mouth, and one of the workers on the train immediately was like, okay, I need you to get out. We're trying to clean. Please wait. And it was calm, but a little forceful. And a lot of gesturing was involved, very close to my proximity, and I just felt like an absolute dum-dum. So this isn't me trying to be high and mighty with these stories, it's literally me trying to be like, everyone's susceptible to this. I learned the 3 W's, okay? And I want you to remember these as well if you're going to any other country, okay? 3 W's. Wait, watch, and what do they do? This should seem like an absolute no-brainer, but it's amazing at how many people, myself included, keep forgetting about this. If you're not sure about something, hang tight. Don't do anything. Just wait. Just go over the side and wait, and then watch what they do. What's everyone else doing? It should be fun. But this is the problem. This is the problem, because there will be situations where you're not sure what you do need to do, and this one little thing right here, this little thing right there, I hate this thing. I understand why it's there, but I hate this thing when it comes to interactions between foreigners and Japanese. And here's why. There was another sort of whoopsie-poopsie moment when it came to the Shinkansen, and this was on the way back. You have a domestic ticket, and then you have your Shinkansen ticket, and the domestic ticket basically gets you to some part of the city before you need to hop off and get another ticket or run your Suica or something like that. But here's the thing, is that when I got on the Shinkansen, I had to put in my ticket and I had to scan my Suica. A Suica card is basically like a prepaid sort of card that expedites the process of getting on a train and using a train. You don't have to go and buy your tickets and waste all this time. It's just bip and you go. When I went on the Shinkansen, it would not let me go on with just the ticket alone. I would scan the ticket in and then it would give me the bing bong and the big old red X and the doors wouldn't open, the turnstile. So I asked someone, I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And she's like, do you have your Suica? And I'm like, oh, I'm an idiot. So I put that in, I swiped my Suica, and the doors open, I went on my way. On the way back, I put in the ticket, and the doors opened. I didn't get any prompt to bip my Suica at all. It was just slip it in, it was open, and the ticket came with me. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Did I screw something up? I'm not sure. And it turns out I did screw something up really, really bad. So I grabbed my ticket and I went to the last station that I was going to meet back up with friends. And I would slide the ticket in and it was like just more bing bong errors. And so I was like, okay, so this isn't working. Maybe I need to go to fare adjustment. So I went to fare adjustment. It's this little machine where if you pay too much or too little, you can actually adjust how much you need to pay or get returned back in order to, well, get out of the gates. So I popped in my yen. I think it said that it charged it. I believe it's a little hazy because I was really stressed out at the time. And so I got my ticket back and I'm like, okay, I fixed it. Put it in, bing bong, and nope. And so I was like, screw it, I have to go talk to a station manager. So here's the thing. The Hayabusa, Shinkansen, and so many other of the stations are under JR, which is like the national sort of rail system, but I had to go to a non-JR, right? So I get my ticket and I go up to the counter of the non-JR station, and it's this kid who just is not gonna have it. It's like 10 o'clock. I can tell this kid's like a early college student, maybe late high school, and I've said so many bad things about Sanensei kids when it came to high school that I knew he just wasn't gonna have it. And so he just looked at me with his eyes half open and was like, go to JR. And I'm like, oh, well, okay then, if we're just gonna be that direct and rude about it. So I went. And now I'm finally looping back around to what I was starting to talk about in the beginning with this. So the lady that I was talking to was behind this counter. And it also didn't help that this is where people with wheelchairs came through because I was blocking all traffic. And rule 1 of Japan is don't inconvenience other people. It is the absolute rule 1 of Japan. And I was inconveniencing a lot of people trying to figure this out. Lady behind the counter just looks at me and I am trying so hard because I'm tired and frustrated. I've been traveling for 4 hours and my Japanese is not the best that it's ever been, having been like 3.5 years of not being in Japan to use it. And so I immediately start out with watashi no warui nihongo wo yurushite kudasai. Literally from the beginning, I am saying, please forgive my bad Japanese. That should have been red flag number 1 that it just I'm gonna be a different case, okay? And so I try to explain slowly, carefully, trying to use as many keywords as possible and trying to use all the sentence structure that I knew to try and explain to this woman that I went to the fare adjustment machine and I tried to figure it out and I couldn't figure it out and it wasn't working and I need help. And so she just rolls me over with 5 minutes of Keigo. She just, I knew the format of what she was trying to say, because that's how Keigo works. The format, the grammatical structure is the same, but all the words are different. So if you want a good example to understand why I hate Keigo so much, let me just put it this way. This right here, this is mimasu. All right? This literally is to see. Now look at this. This is goran ni naru. It means literally the exact same thing, but it's in Keigo. The kanji is different, the word is different. Even some of the grammatical structure is completely different. And now you understand why I hate so much. So this woman just sat there for like 5 minutes and was trying to ask me questions about things that I had done prior. And I was trying with every ounce of my understanding of the Japanese language to try and answer, but it just really wasn't getting anywhere. And so then she spent another couple of minutes explaining to me in Keigo exactly what happened, and I'm like, I've been traveling for 4 hours, I'm barely understanding what you're saying. Can we please can we please fix this? And so then she took my card, put it on a machine, typed in something, and she said it was done. Why didn't we do this before? You didn't have to spend all this time in Keigo explaining it and I didn't understand in the first place. So some of you might be saying, why is this so important and why? Because it's causing so many problems. Language is so determined on hierarchy. Japanese culture and society in general is so hierarchical in its structure that you just cannot escape it. Its language is bent around the idea of hierarchy. So it has to be there, and I'm technically a guest, a customer when it came to the situation. So this lady was trying to just speak very humbly to me, and I appreciate that, but there's no communication going on here. If this was someone talking to someone who was Japanese, I get it. We're not in the system. Most of us don't even understand what the system is, let alone understand how to work within it. Because usually what the process is, and this wasn't just with this particular lady, this was everywhere. This was literally everywhere where I was an active customer or guest somewhere. It was really fast, super hyper complicated Keigo, and then when that didn't work, it was just broken English. That arguably made the situation much, much worse. And then after that, half the time they just give up. You need to add extra steps into here, all right? And what doesn't help is that when it comes to Japanese society, the listener is responsible for understanding what's being said, where here in the US, at least, I don't know about the rest of the Western English-speaking world, but when it comes to the US, it is the speaker's responsibility to be understood. So that in itself is already a cultural clash. And I know that a lot of these clerks and people who are trying to be good hosts or people who are trying to speak humbly, I get it. You're trying to make yourself not sound as big and pronounced, but the problem is that foreigners don't care. We don't care. We want to understand what's being spoken to us so we can respond in kind. Please, for the love of God, Japan, we don't care. And then some of you might be wondering, well, Gaijin, then why don't they just do that? Because there's gonna be one guy. There's gonna be one guy who's like, oh, I know Keigo, I know Japanese perfectly, so I should be spoken to with the amount of respect that I am deserved because I am a customer or I am a guest or something like that. There's gonna be one guy who's gonna be like, if there's someone who talks to if there is someone in some kind of service industry in Japan who's talking to a foreigner and they just use like Master form or they speak slow or something like that, there's gonna be one guy who's gonna be like, why aren't you talking to me in your humble language that you're supposed to be? Why aren't you talking to me at regular speed? You know there's gonna be one guy, some super stupid tryhard who's like, I demand to be spoken to in the same way that you would speak to anyone else in Japanese. And we hate that person. Now, and here's the other thing. I want you to imagine the complications of trying to understand Keigo, right? But doing it while the other person is mumbling. There is nothing in Japan that irritated me more than people mumbling. Because it's already hard enough to understand Keigo. It's already hard enough to understand Japanese in general because it's a consonant vowel, consonant vowel, consonant vowel system. We're not used to this many syllables at one time. Even someone like me who's had a lot of experience with the language, it takes a minute to get used to that again. And I cannot hear you when you are mumbling Keigo behind a mask, behind a sheet of transparent plastic, and Lord knows what else is there. And it was almost epidemic. Remember that kid who just could not give a gosh dang and told me to go to JR? Yeah, that kid was mumbling behind a mask. Every time I went to a konbini, if I was dealing with someone who was younger, it was always mumbling with mask muffling, and then there's a giant sheet of like plexiglass right in front. So it's like, I can't hear anything. I'm just like, huh? Moisto! Yoku kikoe nakatta yo! So because of this, I'm going to do something that I rarely do. Because I believe that this is the height of absolute hubris to do this. I'm going to suggest how to fix this cultural problem. Step 1. If foreigner, speak regular and use Keigo where appropriate. Alright? Rule 2. If foreigner who only knows basic Japanese and either admits to not knowing good Japanese or is very obviously struggling, use mas des form. Alright? You're not necessarily being rude. You're just getting on the... You are coming to the halfway point. You are meeting us halfway so we can communicate properly. And you're not disrespecting us. Because if we're only speaking mas des form, we don't know Keigo. And we don't know that we're being disrespected. We're not gonna... And even if we did, we're not gonna care. I think I made that abundantly clear. Finally, rule 3, if foreigner knows no Japanese, attempt English. That middle second rule is so critical and no one's doing it, and it would fix so many problems. Hey, post-production Gaijin here. Now, some of you are rightfully yelling at me that clerks, cashiers, and other people in uniform have no control over using Keigo, as it is a countrywide business standard practice. Therefore, I want to amend my statement by saying that I am specifically talking to business owners and managers. Please allow your employees to change their manner of speaking when dealing with foreigners. Things like slowing down, dropping Keigo, using must-s form, and so on. And I mean, I've had perfect examples of these things happening. For example, I talked about going to my favorite taiko store, and that's Miyamoto Unosuke Shoten. In Asakusa. So I go in and I needed some help with some different bachi sticks. I needed to figure out, well, which bachi stick should I use with which kind of drums. And so I go up to this very nice, very excitable, lovely gal, and I just ask, I'm trying to get bachi for shime, I'm trying to get bachi for nagado, and I'm doing all this in Japanese. And she responds in Japanese, but she could understand that I'm not super great at it, so she didn't go really fast, and she didn't throw out a whole bunch of Keigo. She knew. And we were able to have a really lovely conversation in that sort of middle ground Japanese because that's what we knew, and it was great. And you know what the crazy thing is? I came to find out that she speaks English completely perfectly fine, but because I approached her in the Japanese that I knew, she responded in kind with the Japanese that I knew, and it was such a perfect example of how this works. And I mean, even when that's not necessarily done in that order, it can still work, because the other example that I have was that time when I went to that Warhammer store in Harajuku. You remember Yuka? This gal's freaking awesome, because the thing is, she came up to me and started using perfect English, and we just had a lovely conversation about 40k and favorite factions and armies and whatnot. But despite not following the 3-rule step, going straight to the English, I walked in that shop with my friends already speaking English, so she already knew, and she went for it, and there was no communication problem whatsoever, and it was so great. Because something that I've always said, something that I always believed in, is when you speak to someone in a language that they understand, you're speaking to their mind. But if you speak to someone in their native language, you speak to their heart. And I think that above all things should be the most important priority. But I really do think that this system, the simple system of 3 steps, it's going to solve a lot of problems. So please, anyone in Japan watching this video, anyone who can communicate these ideas, please communicate these ideas. I think it's going to help a lot of people. Okay, so to take an entire right turn in all of these things in Japan that I hate, I've talked about this before in that other video on my Gaijin Perspective channel, but I know a lot of people didn't see that, so I'll reiterate it here. Japan has a huge problem with plastic waste. There is so much plastic waste in Japan, and I can understand why. And I'm not trying to justify pollution, but here are the reasons as to why this is happening in Japan. One is the concept of omiyage. So when you travel anywhere, like if you take some days off at your work and you travel either somewhere else in the country or you travel to another country, it is very much socially expected of you to bring back something for the entire office or the other group of people that you're working with. Heck, I'll do that when I go to Japan. I'll get omiyage there, bring back here for like my taiko group or my paint club or something like that. The thing of that is that you buy a box of something and it's individually wrapped stuff. It's individually wrapped, usually like cookies or sweets or something like that. So I understand in that context why everything's individually wrapped, because you have multiple people taking it. And the other thing, which I understand why, but I excuse it a little bit less, is that Japan is so careful about presentation. When you go to the store, you're gonna find a lot of things, like even here, if I go to like Mitsuwa or some of the other Japanese stores that are around here, they will wrap up like maybe 3 or 4 vegetables in, I don't know, like styrofoam, and then put a plastic wrap around it. And it's for presentation purposes. It's to assure the customer that it is fresh, it is clean, nobody's mishandled it, it's completely fine to take, to use, to eat, whatever. I understand that, and I get it. But it's such an absolute epidemic. The most ludicrous thing that I experienced on this trip when it comes to plastic waste in Japan is that when we went to the konbini, when we went to the convenience store, I got a bag of donuts because I wanted, I don't know, I was just feeling donuts, you know, sometimes you feel donuts. So I got back to Matt and Jess's place, and I opened up, and then every single donut in there is individually wrapped. This is a bag of donuts that you got in a convenience store, that you get in a konbini. Like, this isn't omiyage. You don't get omiyage from a konbini, not usually. Granted, sometimes you can get omiyage, at Konbini, but this was not that. This was just a bag of donuts, and every donut was individually wrapped, and God, I hated it. Like, I can't excuse that, Japan. It's so much plastic. I remember going to a Konbini and they had bananas individually that were wrapped in plastic, and it wasn't a little plastic. It wasn't like saran wrap. It was just like a full-on sheet, like laminated plastic. This banana got laminated, and it's such a waste of plastic. Japan, please stop. If you need to do it for things like omiyage when multiple people are going to be involved in this, I get it, but you don't need to individually wrap a banana. The banana is going to be okay if it's by itself. Just maybe, I don't know, just we do it here. We make it work. I don't mean to sound like a jerk, Japan, but please stop doing that. Not only is there a humongous amount of plastics and microplastics that are just everywhere in the ocean, underground, it's everywhere. Not only is that a problem for the rest of the world, it's a problem for y'all. So please just stop. So this one's really interesting because this hasn't been a problem up until fairly recently, and I just now saw how bad this was getting. When I went to Gundam Base, I talked about this in the last video, but in case you missed it, I went to this store called Gundam Base. Well, it's like a store slash place for people to show off their paint jobs and whatnot. But the thing is that the store in there is huge. Usually stock is really huge, and there's a lot of variety that you can get there. Like, I love this place. But the last time I was there was so little actual stock. It was like the shelves were full, but it was rows and rows, stacks and stacks of the same Gunpla kits over and over again, and I was baffled as to why this was. And the crazy thing is that this wasn't just Gundam Base. Any hobby store that I went to that had Gunpla, it was the same situation. Rows upon rows, stacks upon stacks of the same kit. And I had no idea how bad scalping was getting in Japan. I don't want what happened to me to happen to someone else who was going to Gundam Base, who, like, this is their one time to go to Japan, and for them to go to Japan and see only this, I just wouldn't want that for anyone. Alright, so we get to the last one, and I don't know where to start. I want to reiterate that what I'm saying in this video are not blanket statements. These are not things that happen in every occasion, but this has happened so many times that I can't help but feel like it just really bothers me. So let's talk about pets. I want to say that I've seen a lot of cases where pets are treated really well in Japan. Like the host family that I was with when I was studying abroad in Yokohama back in like 2007, they had a chocolate lab named Ai, and she was the best thing ever, and they treated her like anyone would treat any other dog, with a lot of love, a lot of care. They just adored that big pupper, and I want to say that, again, to say that this is not a blanket statement, but the way that pets are sold and a lot of times treated in Japan is really bad. I know there are a lot of people here in the US that will treat animals like accessories, but I saw so many instances of pets being treated as accessories and not as animals to care for. And it wasn't necessarily the pet owners where I saw this, it was pet stores where I saw this. The first time I saw it, I heard my friend saying, "Don't buy, only cry." And this was a saying that was said every single time that we passed a pet store, and here's why they said it a whole bunch of times. Pet stores, especially with cats and dogs, will only sell younger animals. They will only sell kittens and puppies. If an animal gets too old, and I don't know what the too old threshold is, but I'm going to guess it's probably about 6 months to a year, if they don't get sold, they get put down. I remember my buddy Shogo, who runs Let's Ask Shogo. I remember he talked about how bad Japan was when it came to euthanasia, and this is when I actually got to kind of experience that. And here's kind of the other thing too. These kittens and puppies, they're in display windows. Like what you would kind of expect mannequins to be in. It was really rare that I saw these kittens and puppies sleeping or playing in areas that were carpeted, that had designated beds. It almost felt like a fish tank. And that really bugged me. And again, this is not a blanket statement. There were some places that I saw that had accommodations for these animals, but so many examples that I saw, it was just these animals in these sterile, just plastic boxes out in front, just to get people's attention. And God, it tore me up inside. And here's the thing, Matt and Jess, my buddies Matt and Jess, they have a cat named Suzu, and I love this little gremlin to death. She's absolutely not a lap cat or high affection cat. She's like a half Siamese, something like that, so that's kind of where they get that independent streak from. But she's still an absolute treasure. She still does cute things. She actually did hop up in my lap at one point in time, and that was an extreme rarity. And they told me so many just awful things. Like, if you were to go adopt, not purchase, but adopt, even that is a huge, huge expense. We're talking hundreds of dollars of expense just to adopt an animal in Japan. That's ludicrous to me. And what broke my heart the most is that Suzu and her brother were actually abandoned animals. And I remember Matt and Jess, if you guys are watching, correct me in the comments section, because I don't quite remember. It was like $300, $400, $500 to adopt Suzu? And I don't even want to talk about euthanasia rates in Japan, because that's just going to depress me and you even further. So let's just... It's a rough scene in Japan. And I really, really wish there was more laws against what I would call animal cruelty, but I mean, different country, different folks, different strokes. It's just something I don't like. Now, like I said many times prior, and I'm going to say it again because I know how the internet and I know how Reddit loves to be, these are not meant to be blanket statements. These are just things that I experienced in Japan abroad, and I wanted people to know these things going in, because I've been to Japan so many times, I've lived in Japan for such a long period of time, just on and off again, that I figured these things wouldn't bother me, and I figured that I wouldn't be finding anything that would really throw me off and either aggravate me, anger me, or just make me feel uncomfortable. But there was. Communication needs to happen. Now more than ever, with so many people going to Japan, and I know there are a lot of people, God, there are so many like VTubers and YouTubers and streamers and whatnot going in Japan. This is the time to have that conversation and have this level of communication. I just hope all in all, you all come away with this with a better grounding and understanding that there are not great things in Japan, while there are also great things in Japan. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something, and I hope you learned that Japan is just like everywhere else, good and bad. So anyway, if you didn't watch the last video, please go check that out. I'm way more positive in that one, I swear. I also have a ton of pictures, a ton of videos. You're gonna love it if you haven't seen it.
And a big thanks to Victory Bells for sponsoring this video. Check them out if you like World War II strategy and culturally appropriate waifus.
Otherwise, gosh, I've got so many ideas. I want to talk about liminality in Japan. I want to talk about how Oda Nobunaga might not have been the worst unifier of Japan ever. He might have actually been one of the better ones, believe that or not. God, I gotta talk about Tears of the Kingdom. There's so many Japanese references to that. Stick around, all right? If you like learning about Japan, if you like learning about world culture, because I do dabble in world culture from time to time, sub up, get notified, check back in every other week, because that's when I got a new video up. So anyway, until next time everyone, this is Gaijin Goombah, signing out.